Okay, in my last video, I got a complaint or two, actually, against, or saying that the volume was too quiet and they couldn't hear me very well. Which I don't know why that is, and to be honest, I could hear myself fairly well on my computer, but for some reason they couldn't, and so what I did is I tried to re-record, or record my next video in a different program, and for some reason the file wouldn't transfer or wouldn't upload onto the where I was going to make the movie, so or the video. so so I just put it off because I didn't feel like recording it, and instead a new idea for a video kind of hit me today. So I decided to record that on the sound program that I used to make the video, which the sound was too low on, but on a different computer. I don't know if that would make a difference or not, but I'm hoping it will. The playback of what I've been doing so far sounds okay. So, I don't know. But anyways, this video is on the different levels of Jewish interpretation and why it's relevant to my series of Judaism versus Christianity. Although this is more of a general outlook on the series as opposed to a part of the series in itself. Basically what's been going on over the last few days is that I've been reading a lot of Christian apologetics websites and a lot of Christian literature, trying to give it a chance. For a moment, it almost convinces you, but after standing back and really evaluating everything I've read, it sort of hit me. It's easy to get caught up in Christianity when you read the Christian sources only. They can make a fairly convincing argument when read by themselves, but when it comes down to it, if you ask your run-of-the-mill Christian, they will tell you that the Tanakh clearly prophesies of Jesus. They will tell you that if you read the New Testament and cross-reference it with the Old Testament, it's clear that Jesus fulfills all these prophecies. Now this is clearly false. This is not to discount the entire religion. That's not the point of this. But the common claim of Christians is simply false. Now there are 4 levels of interpretation referred to within Judaism. The first is Peshat, and this basically means the plain meaning of the text. If you're going to say that Jesus is referred to clearly, as they would, then you must say that he is referred to with a plain reading of the text. And clearly, if you honestly do the research, he is not. If you look up all the so-called prophecies that are supposed to refer to Jesus, there is a first primary reading that makes much more sense to this context, and then you can maybe, if you are a Christian, possibly refer it to Jesus secondly. Now, just for background, there are 3 other forms of interpretation. The next is remez, and this refers to what is implied by the text, though not explicitly stated. The next form is drash. This refers to an allegorical or typological interpretation. And the next level is sod, which means hidden. And this basically is what Jews do with the Kabbalah. Now, my point discussing these levels of interpretation is that if you honestly do this research, Jesus is never referenced to by the Peshat interpretation. So what does this mean? Well, for instance, the Karaite Judaism movement supposedly limits itself to the Peshat interpretation. And this is similar to the Christian claim of Scripture only, or sola scriptura, and they often limit their ways of interpreting as well. So if you ask them if they look for plain and simple reading of the Bible, then they will say that they do. Well, the writers of the New Testament, who they put their faith in, and are the ones that claim that Jesus fulfilled these prophecies, would disagree with them, and they do not go for a Peshat fulfillment with Jesus. Now, my purpose for this video is twofold. For one is to point out that these other methods of interpretation are Jewish. The Oral Torah employs each of these methods on occasion. So this is one point that I've seen some of the Christian websites I've been reading say, and it really kind of stuck in my head. So that's to say that it's not an ordinary for Scripture to be understood in a way that seems to not go against, but differ from the Peshat understanding. And this is what the New Testament writers did. So this is giving the New Testament writers some credit. Now the second purpose is to take away some credit from the New Testament writers. The problem is that when you become entirely reliant on other methods of interpretation, your arguments can't hold much weight, in my opinion. Now, I don't know the exact quote, but some Jewish thing said something along the lines of always looking to the plain and simple reading first. And I think Rashi's commentary primarily deals with this reading. And as I said, Christians would claim that they do follow the plain and simple reading. Also, the Karaites, who I mentioned earlier, claim to only follow the plain and simple meaning. Basically, if you're a Karaite, or if you follow Karaite interpretation of the Bible, then there's definitely no argument for Jesus. You can't make much of a case for him or for the New Testament being reliable. The only possibility is if you believe that you can entirely rely on deeper levels of interpretation, which I don't think Christians, before realizing that they had to, would agree with, and though they unknowingly do by agreeing with their New Testament writers. So if you're an open-minded Christian, look at the prophecies that are supposed to be fulfilled by Jesus, and look at the context. You'll see that Jesus has no leg to stand on if you're only going to rely on the Peshat interpretation. So the question becomes this: are you willing to entirely depart from a plain and simple understanding of the text in order to keep your faith in Jesus, a later addition to the Tanakh called the New Testament, which by your own admission prior to studying you would find the non-plain and simple reading to be wrong? Or are you going to concede that one must give precedence to the plain and simple reading of the text, look primarily to that, and as a possible result lose your faith in Jesus, but strengthen your faith in the true God of Israel and his Torah?